Council Social Service Grants Committee meeting, January 3rd, 2020. This is 2 p.m. in the Holiday Conference Room. I want to wish everybody, or hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I'll call this meeting to order. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the November 22nd meeting.
So moved.
I'll second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. Item 3, discussion splitting out aging services.
Okay.
Tasha?
Yes, so at the council meeting where the vote took place to outsource social services grant process, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not aging services should be pulled out and a certain dollar amount dedicated to that group. So we need this committee to make a decision on how you would like us to proceed with that. If you'd like a staff recommendation, we're happy to offer one, but we're also happy just to listen to whatever it is that you want us to do.
Okay, what does splitting out aging services mean?
So I think we would...
Adding them to the...
We would be, if I tracked the conversation correctly, we would be pulling out senior centers, Jayhawk Area Agency on Aging, any of those agencies that apply for funding that provide aging services. They would be in a separate pool. And I believe what was being suggested is that a certain dollar amount would just be dedicated to those activities. And so that wouldn't really be a competitive process for them. Was my takeaway from the conversation at the council meeting. So yeah, that's what we left. That's what staff left that meeting with, the understanding that some had the desire to do. I think that is, well, I'll be quiet.
Yeah, Councilman Lisser. I run a loose meeting. You can just start talking.
Yes, sir. I would make a motion to not to leave it as it is and not split out the aging services.
I'll second it for some discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
My position, thank you, Councilman Padilla. My position is I don't know where you start and where you stop with that. Is the next thing that we do that we then split out child care services, then we split out mental health services, and we split out, I don't know where you start, I don't know where you stop. Obviously, at that point in time, we would then have to come up with some type of weighting factor that takes a portion of the money that goes specifically to that, and I think it makes no sense.
I had some questions about doing that too. One of them would have been that if we did that, would we then be establishing a set amount for them? And I guess would it be a guaranteed amount and no need for reporting or any of that other stuff that goes along with the competitive part of the grants? I don't know that that's something that I would really want either. I think it's important that we do have accountability in the monies that we do allot to these services. I do think that the aging services are important, and I think a necessary organizations that we give to in Topeka, because they, in my opinion, have limited resources to them with regards to continue their operations, but that comes to the administration of the funds and the organization that they oversee. So I wouldn't want to give the impression that it was a guarantee without having some kind of accountability to it. And so that's my hesitation in splitting them out. I do think that, and I know it's on our agenda for discussion later on, that the scoring sheet and so forth, I think with maybe some look at that their ability to meet the the reporting requirements and accurately report their outcomes and outputs should make them as competitive as anyone else. And so I would not favor splitting them out at this point myself.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on this item? I'm also in agreement. So how does this work? Are we going to then make the motion to recommend back to council? Was that what we've done? That
So the
we
way,
would recommend not doing that?
that you guys, I think the way that we left it with the council is that the committee was going to come back together, make these final decisions on the few kind of loose ends, and then we would have you do another committee report back to the council that would include that you chose not to outsource aging services, and then whatever decision points are on these other agenda items. I'd like to take the priority sheet back too, but we'll talk about that when we get to that item.
Which at that point, when it comes back, I would assume if there is a council member that has an issue with one of the decisions, they could try to do a friendly amendment to the report or what have you at that point in time.
And you guys will need to make a decision on who's going to actually present that committee report because,
When will that be?
well, it would be, even if we
After
got it
Tuesday?
on the next council meeting, you will not be there for the action part, Mr. Cohen. So we will need one of your peers here to be willing to present the committee report. to that.
Mr. Padilla was speaking about that the other night, that he was happy to do that, so I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. Unless I
One of you will
misunderstood.
figure
You're
that
quicker
out.
than I.
We'll help you out. Don't worry.
All right, so do we need to call a vote then, and is that how we
Yes.
pass that on? So all those in favor of not splitting out the aging services, say aye.
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 And I also say aye. Those opposed, none, there isn't any. So this does pass. Councilman Lesser, Councilman Padilla, one of you will have the pleasure of doing that. Moving on to item 4, discussion of the appeal process. Now,
You have a,
what have we done in the past and what are they asking us to do?
so you have this one pager here in your materials that this is just the paragraph that describes our appeal process that's in the RFP currently. So that this tells you how they appeal their scores. I believe, well, I know, it's on record. Staff's recommendation to not only the governing body, but this committee is that the appeal process is part of what creates the situations that none of us like about this process. We don't feel that the appeal process is appropriate. I'm not aware of another grant program where you're allowed to appeal. Certainly, any of the competitive grants that the city applies for in our department primarily, I can speak to, we're not given the opportunity to appeal. Your score is your score, and it is what it is. I think that creates this environment where we have a lot of back and forth, and the decisions don't feel final. So, that being said, I'll be quiet now.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to do away with the appeal process. G.
Do we have a second?
Well, before I second, I guess we could do it under discussion, but I'd be interested in maybe hearing some feedback from some of the people attending here who are part of the process and have afforded themselves the appeal process in the past. Would we do that before I make the second on this motion or under discussion for Mr. Lesser's motion?
It matters.
I'll second it, and then we'll take discussion.
Okay. Is there anybody that'd like to speak on this item?
Okay.
Councilman? So was the appeal process set up when the social service grant process here was all set up? Do we know?
So many years ago, There was not an appeal process, and we had very long, you probably have heard this story before, but very long, lengthy council meetings because everyone would then appeal to the full council. And so when this committee was established, this committee decided to implement the appeal process a few years back, not sure when. And then people were appealing to this committee, but then also appealing to the full council as they did last go around. So that's kind of the history of the appeal process.
As part of the history of that, from then till now, how many, would you guess roughly, agencies avail themselves of that appeal process?
I would say almost all of the agencies that don't get funded appeal.
Well, just my 2 cents.
I think we have somebody wanting
Oh,
to come
okay,
and
good.
talk.
I was hoping somebody would.
Deborah Dawkins, East Topeka Senior Center. And the only reason that I would advocate for the appeal process is in 1 year when we did take advantage of it, it did result in funding because it helped clear up some inaccuracies in the scoring. So I would hate that it not be an opportunity presented to properly write and get an explanation of the points and go back and be able to defend why you believe the points were not accurate.
Thank you. You know, I understand, Ms. Dawkins, if you'd wait just a second. I understand the desire to remove the appeal process so that there isn't a lot of politicizing, as it's been stated, for the process. My hesitancy is customer service. And it's almost like anything else. I was talking about a service provider today at my home that's not doing what they're supposed to do, and there's a way for me to appeal what they're supposed to do and get the service I'm paying for. And it's just, for me, I'm hoping that if we move forward with the outsourcing piece, that pressure that is said to come to bear to council members will be relieved because there'll be someone else looking at it. But I like the idea of someone being able to look at it just in case a mistake was made. T wasn't crossed or I wasn't dotted. That's my feeling about an appeal process, is that there's at least one opportunity to say, this was incorrect, I made it incorrect, or the reviewing party made it incorrect, that it's a customer service kind of a thing. It's almost everything that we talk about on the council is, have we heard from the public? Well, this is the same way. Have we heard from the agency that applied? And so that's my reluctance to remove the appeal process completely. If it would be my desire to leave it in there, but it would be not the council or this committee that would hear that appeal. So that's my 2 cents, Mr. Chair.
If I could just offer a little bit of information and follow
Sure.
up to your statements. I completely understand the desire for customer service. We strive for that. And what we've done in response to agencies that maybe had questions about their scores is each year when we provide those scores back, we are always happy to meet with folks and go over the scores that they received and give them the feedback so that in the next application cycle, they are able to improve in those areas where maybe they didn't score as well as they'd liked. We modeled that after processes that we go through for competitive grants that we apply for. There's generally that follow-up on the backside to help folks improve on the, going forward.
I'm aware of staff's efforts to be helpful where they can. But if it is no longer staff's responsibility to do it, if we outsource it to someone else, are we as confident, even to our outsourcing vendor, that everything will be given the same diligence that you guys have performed.
Those are things that we're going to ensure end up in the contract so that we can, if we find out that it's not being provided, we can enforce that. And either make them do it or terminate a contract
Okay.
if they refuse to.
Yes, Mrs. Alcala.
I would suggest, or as being involved with the senior aspect of it since this summer, I think that it is short-sighted. I think it is failing in customer service if we take the appeal process out. Our job is customer service. My job is customer service. City folks' job is customer service. Who we contract out to is customer service. That's our job. And so I agree that it would not be beneficial to take the appeal process out and that there be some kind of consistent oversight if this is going to, with this being third-partied out. I would say also that I think that there was agreement earlier on that this is an issue with having a flawed process. I heard that mentioned a couple of times during the course of these meetings and at council sessions or at city council meetings as well. So, always looking, I think it's unfortunate that this is being third-partied out because my thought about customer service is we always want to do better. We always want to do better, be better for those that we serve, and not having any firm numbers on any kind of time study, to me, is also lacking in how we approach spending taxpayer dollars by contracting these out. But again, I just think the appeal process is important. I think that when it comes to those of us who have served for a number of years in customer service, we understand that we may not all like the process, but the bottom line is the process that serves the public and the taxpayer, and they are the customer.
And Mr. Chair, I think the importance that lies within this being accomplished satisfactorily lies within making sure that the priority sheet is set as the council wants it to be, and then is making sure that the score sheet accurately reflects those priorities. In accomplishing that, I think, as Sasha kind of alluded to, an important thing in the RFP is for us to talk about pre-meeting solicitations, making sure that there are opportunities, and I know there have been in the past process, but making sure there's opportunities for the grantees to come and ask questions prior to filling out the graph, make sure that there's during the process another time that they're able to do that, and then even prior to the final date. I think those are the important things that we put in the process of the scoring sheet and the solicitation of them being submitted. The problem when you come into the appeal process then is you need to create a whole nother set of priorities in how you're going to look at the appeal. Are you going to give the weighting to the fact that it was turned in late, X amount of weighting, so that's going to be approved? Or are you going to get that the report that was submitted was mathematical errors were made? I mean, where do you stop at doing that? At the end of the day, the job is clearly define what the expectations are for the submission, clearly define the timetable, what those are going to need to be done, and clearly define that your score sheet meets and satisfactorily represents the priorities that you've set forth. And if you've met all those, then that's the way it is. There again, with the many grants programmed throughout, there isn't an appeal process, and that would be my position on that.
I don't
Okay.
have any.
Does anybody else have any comments on this item? Anybody from the audience? I have a question for staff. Can this appeal process does that decision have to be made here, or can it be part of when the discussion of the contract is going on?
We can do it either way, as long as this group is willing to defend their decision to the governing body, is what my reply to you would be. And I would, if I could just, sorry, don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but in the 5 years that I've been involved in this, I can think of one appeal where a score was actually changed because there was an error. And that didn't result in that agency being funded, if I'm not mistaken. It was still too low of a score to get them into the funded group.
It's interesting.
The majority of the appeals that we receive are because agencies don't like the way that a particular section was scored, and that's subjective. It's not an objective, hard thing that you can set a parameter up, and so I would just, I would urge you guys to consider that as well.
Okay, Councilman Lesser has a motion to withdraw the appeal process. Is there any more discussion on this item? Okay. Let's go ahead and vote. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
The result is 2-1. Next item is item 5, update the score sheet.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I don't know if I would need to make a motion, but it seems to me that it would make more sense for us to move item 6, finalize priority sheet on the agenda to update score sheet. I think you're kind of getting the horse ahead of the wagon the other way.
I'm fine with changing it, Councilman. Yeah, okay. We're fine with that. Do we have to have an official? Okay, we'll just go on to number 6, finalize the priority sheet, and then we'll update the score sheet.
So this item is on the agenda because if you had made a change to the aging services, then that would have changed this document. You guys have a copy of the priority sheet that you saw earlier this year and voted on, but I would note that there is one word in red. That word was formerly agencies, and it should not have been. That was an error on staff's part. When the committee a couple of years ago chose to set a maximum that new programs could apply for, there was a lot of discussion during that cycle about, is it the agency or the program, and the committee came down on a program. It should be based on a new program, not an agency, whether or not they're new. That's the way that we have implemented this since it was adopted into the priority sheet. We had an incorrect word. That was an error on staff's part, and I believe related to that back and forth between, is it the agency or the program? So we have implemented that as new program, whether or not the agency has been funded by the city or not is not the criteria, it's the program itself. So there's one correction to the score sheet. We don't have any other proposed revisions, but I would like it if you guys could vote on this, because this sheet does, I believe, need to go back to the council. This is kind of your answer to most of their questions in terms of aging services and how you chose to deal with them and appeal process, all of that. But I'd be happy to answer any other questions you guys have on the priority sheet.
Maybe when we provide the priority sheet, include last year's amount or something down here in the total, and we can kind of see the progression and the maybe year to year, year over year.
Do you want that added to the priority sheet, or would you like us to just add a second page that shows maybe the last 5 years in funding, so that
That might be
the
helpful.
body could see what the history was?
Yeah, that might be helpful.
Okay.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the social service funding priorities for year 2021? Is that correct,
Yes.
2021?
I know, right? It trips me up too, but yes, when we start the process this year, we will
Yeah,
be
this is for the budget process for the
for
next year.
2021 to set that dollar amount, basically. And that, well, this is the priority sheet that the vendor will use for the application cycle this year because agencies are applying for 2021 funding.
I make the motion.
Okay,
Second.
motion and a second. All, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Motion passes. Update the score sheet.
Okay. So you have the current score sheet before you. On page 2, you'll see that we've turned font red and done strike-throughs of program grant administration is effective. This section has historically been scored by staff. So if we are outsourcing this, we believe that this section needs to be removed from the score sheet. The past grant administration can still be and should still be considered by the vendor that provides that service, but we think it is a better score sheet without that section being included. They will evaluate the past performance based on the outcomes and outputs that were included in our contract with the agencies, and then what was reported in that final report for the year. So we said we were going to do 20, and we did 25, yes, or, the other way. And they will consider that as part of the application process, but we do not think that it should be included on the score sheet. That is the only change that we are proposing. Did I leave anything out?
So am I hearing then after for the 2022, or are you proposing it go back in there since that will be the first year that it was done?
We wouldn't propose that. We think that that is an internal function that doesn't necessarily show up on the score sheet, right? Because the way that, and the body voted to keep our process and just outsource it to a vendor, right? So
Right.
there would be a committee that scores the applications. They're not scoring that item right there. It doesn't belong on this score sheet. Perhaps that's information that's provided to that committee, that each application it's indicated, here's what the outcomes and outputs were stated as, and here's what they actually produced for the past year. That maybe is provided to the committee that actually scores the applications. But those are details that we feel we can work out during that contract process once a vendor is selected. Because I'm confident that whoever we have apply and eventually get selected will have experience in this. We're crafting the RFP to ensure that. We've got language in there that says, you're an agency that has provided grant making and grant administration for 3 years or more. So we feel confident that we're going to get groups that have experience in this, and we can talk to them about what is the appropriate way to handle that piece of it. Another thing that I would say to you is that one of the new things that we'll need to do with this committee and a vendor is create a process by which the vendor will come back to this committee. We believe that that should happen about this time of year or after the new committee is seated, and the vendor will report out on here's what X agency said they were going to provide, here's what they actually provided, and do a review of those outcomes that you guys have paid for. We think that we probably were remiss in not having that happen already, and we want to correct that now. I think that will really inform this committee and the community about what those tax dollars are being spent on.
I agree. I also would like to see if we can incorporate in this sheet, though, a non-weighting factor that does ask, or I assume we could do it. It just seems to make the most sense at the same time they're finishing the process of evaluating who we've outsourced it to.
Oh, okay.
What's the ease of the process? Did you receive the support that was outlined you were going to? Were they timely in responding to your phone calls, your questions?
You want a survey that we give to the agencies to provide us feedback on that experience with a vendor for the grant
Yeah,
process.
correct.
We can do that.
And I think the thing that's important is if it is given as a part of this at the same time, I think we're going to get a more honest response versus, after the fact, if they're, if you didn't perform well, that human nature is that you're going to be upset about, the process or whatever it was versus, so that's why I say I think at the same time I would like,
As the application, so would we start that in year 2?
yeah, I would say year 2, yeah.
We couldn't do that this year, have the vendor go through the process for the first year, and then in year 2, we would have them give that to agencies with the application?
I think we could have portion of it even this year, once we set that RFP that says, okay, you're going to have a pre-meeting, you're going to have, whatever it is that, that's your expertise. You set up and say that, and then, were they timely in phone calls, returning your phone calls in a timely manner, those type of things. I think that we can, I'm open to suggestions, but I think that starting year 1 certainly gives us some information that if we are, and keeping in mind, if we do it at this point before anybody knows good, bad, whether they've been awarded, they hadn't been awarded, they're going to be more likely to be honest in their opinion, quite frankly. And if one of the things that shows up, even for, somebody who got exactly what they want to, but still struggle to get return phone calls and stuff like that, they're going to answer that as well at that point.
What if we did it between the deadline to submit an application, but before scores were released?
I think that's fair.
Right at the end of that application, was that what you were about to say?
Yeah, what I was about to say was I think it's almost two-part. I think the survey needs to be two-part. It is, was the information provided by the vendor? Did it provide you the information necessary in order to fill out the application? And then there's a second part that is, if I had questions and I asked for clarifications, how did the vendor do? And it really becomes two parts, is how is it initially presented, and then how did they see the process go? But I agree, that needs to come before scores are released.
So application, questions about that process, the workshop, all of that stuff, and then at the end of the year, maybe a broader survey of how is your experience working with the vendor?
Basically asking the customer service question.
Yeah. What was the quarterly reporting process like?
Right.
Were your payments remitted in a timely manner? Things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
And certainly, there's certainly easier to hold them accountable, right, wrong, good or bad,
Right.
as an outside vendor versus.
I think this is a very good idea also as we consider this, because we're going to do it this year, but, for the 2021 numbers. But we need to know how it goes from those folks that are going to be asked to do it in this manner for the first time and using this vendor. We need to get input on whether it's working in order to be able to ask whether, so the council knows whether or not, the governing body knows whether they want to continue the process.
We got a public comment?
I think the point about having a survey is very, very good. I think that really lends itself to that full customer service experience. My question would be, is currently in this process that's still with the department right now, is there any customer survey that you all send out for how you all are doing as well? Do we do any of those type of surveys in the city, I guess, for departments when we have this? This,
Are we
City
doing one
manager.
around this?
We do it here at this meeting. We have a public input for all the agencies to offer feedback at that point.
but nothing in
and they do.
writing or nothing that goes out?
No.
Not for this program, to answer your question more broadly on many of our rehab programs and things that we administer just programmatically through the department, there is a customer survey that goes out at the end of the project.
Okay, but not this one, okay.
And I think Councilwoman-elect Alcala makes a good-
Alcala.
Alcala makes a good point. I mean, many people are going to be reluctant, especially just human nature. What's going to happen next time if you come up here and do that versus it being, in a written, private,
Or even confidential,
Confidential.
anonymous. I think those are really
So
good.
I was looking for.
When I worked
Anonymous.
for the VA, we always had our surveys anonymous. So it's just food for thought.
Are there any more comments on this item?
Well, I want to thank Councilman Lesser, in spite of himself. He came up with
That hurt, didn't it?
Oh, yeah,
That
yeah,
hurt
yeah.
bad.
You got me earlier, so. What I like was, what I'm hearing is, while we've decided to move to a third-party vendor for this, we're not completely washing our hands of our concern and our responsibility to oversee the proper service given to the organizations who will be applying. And I think that's important, that level of service is at a high standard, as has been performed by our city staff, because I think it's extremely telling about how important all of these agencies are to us by how much time we spend in making sure that they get the service that we should be giving all of them, regardless of amounts, just the service itself. So I appreciate Councilman Lesser for bringing that up, and comments from Councilwoman Alcala. I think those are important things to note, that city staff can set a high bar, and I think that bar should be maintained with whomever is chosen. Thank you.
Is there any more discussion on this item? Update the score sheet and remove said section? Do we have a motion and a second on this one?
You didn't yet.
Sarah?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would like to, at this point, it would be my position to listen to any public comments in regards to the scoring sheet. And then I personally then would like to postpone, I would then like to have some more time to evaluate the scoring sheet for the final approval on that, if we do have time to do that.
I think we do. You guys don't seat the new committee until mid-February, is that right? So we can fit another meeting in. You'll be minus a member, so the two mics will have to.
Right, and that won't slow our process of finding a vendor. I mean, this information is not going out until we're to that
Well, and
point anyway.
the score
So
sheet
there is
would
time.
be something we would include when we sit down with a vendor to negotiate a contract. The priority sheet is important for us to get finalized and go back to council, because I would like to attach this to our RFP for a vendor.
And we've done that, we've done that. And I just would like to list, like I say, hear some input on there, as well as, because that's why I'd like to have some more time then, after I hear that, to evaluate the weighting factors. I just use, for instance, one of the questions we heard during the process, organizational leadership is strong and maintained, and we had some complaints, on that. I think at least 15% is made from racial or ethnic minorities, 70% gender, and I think 65, we had some, I think that was one of the complaints. If you remember, we had the percentage of the board, 65% of attendance, and then we had, one board that had 30 people on the board, and then another board that had, 5 people on the board. And so not that I'm minimizing that, but sometimes I'd like to have some time to look at that to see, is there another way that we can ask the same, try to achieve the same end result by making the words, by rewording it differently. Those type of things, and I just use that as an example, if that makes sense.
Staff has no dog in the fight over the attendance deal. That one is, you guys, whatever you feel is appropriate. I believe the 65% attendance may have come from part of those council attendance requirements, just as a model to be used. But we would strongly urge you to take serious consideration about the racial and ethnic and gender makeup of the boards. This is one that gets brought up every year. And again, we'll defer to whatever decision is made by the committee, but we will continue to say out loud that we think that it's very important that the boards of agencies across the community, as well as the governing body of our own city, look like the community that they represent. It's important. And it shouldn't be minimized, in our opinion. But
And quite
that's our
frankly,
recommendation.
and quite frankly, initially, I don't have any issues with that. I'm going to do some due diligence on
Yeah.
that, but meet regularly over 65% attendance. I want to see if there's a way that I do understand when you have a large board of, individuals that, I can give you a million different scenarios, but I don't know if that's the best way to ask that question in regards to participation, if that makes sense.
Yes. We're open to whatever.
And I just want to look at that a little bit
Yeah.
more.
We have some public comment on that.
My name is Kay Gray, and I represent Pappin's Landing Senior Center. And we have quite a few people that come there, but the people that come there, they, come on their own idea to come. Actually, we don't have very many African American or Hispanic. We have a few, but our board is really representative of the people that we service, but it's not, we don't, as it turns out, we don't have a lot of ethnic people coming there. We have a few, and we are represented by those on the board, but we don't have the percentages that it kind of states in that. And we've talked about that. Dennis Tenpenny, I think, addressed that at one of our meetings at the appeals, that that can be a problem because sometimes the people that you ask to be on the board, maybe they're a qualified person, they're a really good person that would come and be helpful, but maybe they aren't particularly an ethnic background that would fill that slot. So that's always a consideration too. So we just wanted to, I thought of that and thought of Dennis's comments before. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I've also heard about, especially large boards trying to find that one specific person to fill that ethnic minority group that is very difficult to do. So, is there any other discussion? Yeah.
The other thing I would mention is, with the decision to remove 10 points from the back one as far as capacity, you may have another criteria that you would develop that would fill that. I mean, you can always do 90 points as your total, but it also leads to the discussion as to whether or not there's another criteria that should be part of the application that we're not covering. I don't know what it would be at this point. I haven't studied it hard enough to even dream of what that would be. But with the decision to remove 10 points, that's something that may be something you would consider, or you're restructuring what's more important to you when you're ranking these, and maybe that 10 points needs to go to another portion of the application as part of the process. So it's an opportunity to really give us more time to be able to take a look and think about that.
Mr. Chair?
So,
Mr. Chair, if I could comment quickly on Kay's comments. I know that struggle because I've sat on a bunch of of committees and boards, and typically I'm the standout because there aren't many Hispanics or blacks on a number of committees. It's gotten a lot better, but I'm wondering if I know there are a number of organizations that prepare minorities to serve on committees and boards. And that's one of the efforts that they have organized for us, to say, here's this list of people that have been trained, they know what it is to serve on a committee and a board. And I try as much as I can to share that list with anybody who's looking to fill positions, and I've been fortunate enough to have a couple of those seated on those committees and boards. Now, I'm wondering if we could share that information with whomever, the mayor's office, with Sasha, so that when this process is ongoing, that you could bring that issue to them and say, you know, we are in need of this representation. Do you have some names that we could contact to interview them, see if they have an interest for the committee or the board? And that has worked out well, because oftentimes, until you reach out to somebody, people don't feel like they can just walk in and put their hand up. That if there is somebody who says, I need you on this committee and we'd like to talk to you about it, I think the likelihood that you'll find more minorities or ethnic groups who are willing to give it a shot, because the youth are in that group seems to be the ones that I've been lucky to talking mid-20s, 30s, you know, to replace an aging board that a lot of us have experienced across the city, is that the boards are aging out, and you need new blood. And if there's an idea or suggestion of where I can share those names with.
We can, if I'll
Yeah,
get with you and
okay.
get the list, and then we can have it available here for agencies that contact us, or we can refer them to the organization that has it, whichever's easiest.
Well, I know there's a Black Leadership Program in Topeka, there's a Latino Leadership Program in Topeka. Those are all programs that are developing people who want to serve the community in some capacity.
I just
We have
want
some
to
more
use
public
this
comment.
opportunity to address that, in that I'm working with the Momentum 2022, and one of the objectives is diversification on boards, nonprofit boards. And to that, United Way will be sponsoring a all-day workshop in April, which will be open to sort of recruit people to, it will pair agencies with their mission with people who are seeking to maybe sit on boards. And so this would be an opportunity for the two groups to come together. But that has been a committee that I have sat on the Momentum 2022, with a specific objective to getting more diversity on boards. But to address what Mr. Lesser said, I know specifically with Community Action, the complaint was that a lot of their board members were appointed. And so they did not have the opportunity to, be selective in recruiting a certain minority group because they were appointed from a specific group. And so that, while I believe, certainly as a minority, that it's important that we be represented on boards, I do identify with the difficulty. Number one, people have a tendency to recruit people that look like them. And so you have to make it a conscious effort to seek out other people so that you will be more representative of the total city population.
Great. Thank you for your comments. There was some discussion of maybe moving this to February's meeting. Do we want to proceed with that or just act now? Councilman Lesser?
Well, I would like some time to evaluate, as I'd shared. I'm not necessarily have to move I mean, I don't need that. I mean, I need a week maybe, you know, so if you wanted to participate in that process, I'm fine with that.
Unless it happens before Tuesday.
Is it that fast?
So Liz will get with you guys and try to identify a date when we can get back together, get everybody in the room.
Okay.
Is it this
We
Tuesday?
hope that you're involved.
Yeah, Tuesday.
Oh, shit.
I would agree with the next chair, Councilman Lesser, that moving it down the road to later in January or February would give us good time to look at it and
Okay.
review that. Because I do like the thoughts that I've heard in here. about
I
looking
will
at-
say I'd like your input, though. I mean, you've been a member
Sure.
of this committee, so I definitely would like to have your input, you know, prior to that meeting as well. And
Okay.
I would certainly welcome your participation during such meeting.
If I may, would it be helpful if we ask the agencies to send their input over they all have the score sheet, but we'll send it out again? Send their
Excellent idea.
individual input in advance, so you could look at that input before the meeting, so
Good idea.
then it will help with generating new questions or changing questions before, so we can get it done in the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and some of them that aren't represented here today. And I think addressing this from, you know, please participate. We're doing this to help you. So you know, as a you know, proactive approach. You know, before you know, so you
Okay,
know.
we will send an
be
email
great.
out to all the agencies, and whoever's on Rochelle's listserv for input on the score sheet, and then put that in a document, get it to you in advance of the next meeting, so you can take a look at it before we get to the meeting.
We've got some public comment.
Actually, I hope this isn't a disjointed question from where we are, but I know that there was a letter that went out about the $10,000 that was dated December 17th, and I've heard from one person that a new date to get that $10,000 paperwork in is January 17th. Is that correct? I just want to make
Yes.
sure we're all on the same page. January 17th to have that new information sent in.
Correct.
Okay, just checking. Thank you.
No problem.
What would the committee like to do here?
Motion to adjourn.
We don't have to take action to move it to another meeting?
I mean, probably wouldn't hurt to take that formal vote, but I don't know that it matters.
I don't know that it's
Further you.
necessary. I mean, you've given guidance to the committee as
Yeah,
far as
and
what,
there's-
before you're going to
Seems
meet.
like everybody
It's not a
agrees.
definitive thing. I mean, you basically have given guidance for us to gather information and come back in the next possible meeting date for you to be able to decide on this. So this one, I don't think needs a definitive vote.
Okay, very good.
Councilman Padilla did say something nice about me. If I can get a copy of that tape.
Good. Well, this committee's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Are you going to get back on the committee?
Or